Imogene Crane turned the key in the lock of her third-floor apartment door. Laden with bags of groceries, her joints ached from arthritis. But at 68, she still retained the independence and keen powers of observation that had helped the residents of their small apartment complex in suburban Portland put the bags on the kitchen table. She froze, listening strange. For the third day in a row, not a sound had come from the neighboring apartment. Usually at this time, little Theodore was watching cartoons, the volume of which his mother, Veronica Layton, never bothered to turn down. Imogene hadn't seen her neighbor since Friday, which in itself wasn't suspicious. Nurses often worked weekends. But today was Tuesday, and Veronica and her son still hadn't been seen. Imogene walked over to the wall separating their apartments and listened. Silence. Then a faint sound, not a sob, not a rustle, reached her ears. Imogene's heart clenched uneasily. She went out into the hallway and rang the doorbell of her neighbor's door. There was no answer. She rang again, then knocked. "Veronica? Theo? It's Imogen. Is everything all right?" Light footsteps. Then the doorknob turned slightly, but the door remained closed. The lock. "Theo? Is that you, little man?" Imogen leaned into the door crack. "Grandma Immy?" came the quiet, trembling voice of a 4-year-old boy. "I can't open it. Mommy said not to open." A wave of worry washed over Imogen. "Theo, where's your mommy?" A pause. "She left. Said she'd be back later." "Later? Later when, Theo? Are you home alone?" "Yes. She said I'm a big boy. I can do it on my own." Imogen felt her fingers involuntarily clench into fists. She knew Veronica wasn't a model mother, but this was unthinkable. "Theo, listen to me carefully. I'm calling the police. They're going to help us open the door. It's going to be okay. Just stay where you are." 40 minutes later, the door to the Laytons' apartment was opened by an apartment complex security officer. Imogene and 2 police officers stepped inside. Theodore was sitting on the living room floor, cuddling a tattered plush dinosaur. His blonde hair was tangled and food stains were visible on his t-shirt. The apartment looked relatively tidy, but there was a musty odor in the air. "Hello, Theo," the female officer said softly, taking a seat next to the boy. "My name is Olivia. Can you tell me how many days you've been here alone?" The boy looked at his fingers, silently counting. "A lot," he said at last. Mommy said to count dreams. There were 4 dreams. Detective Marlo Flint arrived on the scene 20 minutes after the first call. A tall woman with short, dark hair, she moved with the purposefulness of someone who doesn't tolerate delay, especially when it comes to children. "Detective Flint, Child Protective Services," she introduced herself, showing her badge. "What do we have here?" Officer Olivia Rivera took her aside while the social worker chatted with Theodore. A child, 4 years old, left alone in an apartment, presumably for 4 days. No signs of physical abuse, but clear neglect. There's food in the fridge, mostly convenience foods and juice packets. On the table is a handwritten manual with instructions on what you can eat and when to go to bed. Flint nodded, her jaw tensing. "The mother?" "Veronica Layton, 33, a nurse at Portland General Hospital. According to a neighbor," the officer nodded toward Imogen, "she was last seen Friday night." "So 4 full days," Flint shook her head. "Phone?" It went to voicemail. Flint walked over to Theodore, who was now holding the juice offered by the social worker. She took off her jacket, hung it on the back of a chair, and squatted down in front of the boy. "Hi, Theo. My name's Marlo. I'm a detective. Do you know what that means?" The boy nodded seriously. "It's like in the cartoon. You look for bad guys." Flint smiled, though her heart clenched. "Sometimes I do. And sometimes I just help people who are lost get home. Do you know where your mom is?" Theo shook his head. "She said she was going on vacation, to take a vacation. She said I'm big enough to do it on my own." Flint exchanged glances with the social worker. "Did she say when she'd be back?" "Thursday. She left a calendar." Theo pointed to the refrigerator, where a children's calendar with the days crossed out was pinned. Flint walked over to the refrigerator. The last day crossed out was Friday. Thursday of the following week was circled in red marker with Mommy's coming back. 6 days. She planned to leave the 4-year-old alone for 6 days. While the social worker stayed with Theo, Flint and Officer Rivera began a methodical search of the apartment. In Veronica's bedroom, they found the first major piece of evidence: printed e-tickets in the names of Veronica Layton and Xander Pierce. 2 one-way tickets to Honolulu, Hawaii, leaving Saturday morning, 6:30. She didn't even take return tickets, Rivera muttered. Like she wasn't sure when she'd be back. Or with whom, Flint added, looking through the other papers on the desk. Look, a reservation for the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. Honeymoon suite, booked for a week. In the drawer of the bedside table, they found Veronica's second cell phone disconnected. Smart, Flint said, putting on her gloves and turning on the device. Left the main phone with her and turned off the spare so no one could track its location here. The phone booted up, showing several missed calls and messages from co-workers. The last was a message from Xander, sent Friday night. Can't wait for tomorrow, babe. You deserve this vacation. Flint scrolled through the message history. The correspondence with Xander had started about a month ago. Judging from the context, they'd met at a bar where Veronica was celebrating a friend's birthday. In the kitchen, the detective found handwritten instructions for Theo taped to the refrigerator door. Theo, food in the refrigerator, breakfast, yogurt and a candy bar, lunch, peanut butter sandwich or cereal, dinner, heat up one of the boxes in the microwave. Number 2 button, just like I taught you. Go to bed at 8. Don't open the door for anyone. Mommy will be back on Thursday. Be a good boy. The instructions were written carelessly, as if in a hurry or without much care. No, love you, or call me if anything happens. Flint felt anger rising in her, which she quickly suppressed. Emotions only hindered the investigation. In the living room, Officer Rivera was reviewing surveillance footage on a laptop connected to the apartment complex's security system. Found it, she said. Saturday, 6 a.m. Veronica comes out of the apartment with a suitcase, alone. They went through the footage. Veronica Layton, a slender blonde with sunglasses, was rolling a small suitcase behind her despite the early morning. She didn't look back at the door of her apartment, where her son remained. Her expression was hard to make out, but there was impatience in her gait. Check the parking lot footage, Flint ordered. The new footage showed Veronica approaching a black sports car where a young man was waiting for her. Even from the grainy footage, it was obvious that he was much younger than she was, slender, with long hair pulled back in a casual bun. They hugged, he picked up her suitcase, and they drove off. Run the license plate on the car and this Xander Pierce guy, Flint said, and see if they actually got on that flight. By this time, there was a whole team working on the apartment. The social worker had prepared Theo for a temporary move to a foster home until the situation cleared up. Flint watched the boy mechanically pack his belongings into a small dinosaur backpack. Theo, she called softly. Do you know who Xander is? The boy frowned. Mom's friend. She always laughs when she talks to him on the phone. He's young, like my kindergarten teacher. You've seen him? Once. He came in late. I was supposed to sleep, but I was thirsty. He'd give my mom flowers and they'd drink wine. Flint nodded, making a mental note. And your dad, Theo? Do you see him? Sometimes. He lives far away. Mom says he's a busy man. As Theo was being taken away, Imogen Crane insisted on walking him to his car. She gave him a little stuffed cat she'd gotten from her apartment. So, the dinosaur won't be lonely, she said, and Theo smiled weakly for the first time. After the boy left, Flint returned to the apartment, where evidence collection continued. Officer Rivera approached her with a clipboard. Information on Xander Pierce, 19 years old, lives in a motel on the outskirts of town. No major offenses, but 2 priors for disorderly conduct and 1 for attempted fraud. Tried to cash a forged check. Never went to trial. 19, Flint repeated. She's exactly 14 years older than him. Check his social media, see who he hangs out with. And yes, did they get on that flight? Confirmed. Left Saturday morning for Honolulu. I've contacted Hawaii PD. They'll check out the hotel. Flint nodded and glanced at the pictures on the wall. Veronica and Theo, the usual family moments. They were smiling in most of the pictures, but there was some elusive coldness in all of them, as if the moments were staged. As a nurse, she should have known the consequences, Flint said. It wasn't an impulsive decision. She consciously planned this. The neighbor says Veronica has always been a bit aloof as a mother, Rivera reported. She often left Theo with babysitters or asked Imogen to watch him, but she'd never left him alone for this long before. And the baby's father? Brian Layton, divorced 2 years ago. Lives in Seattle, comes down once a month. We've already contacted him. He's in shock, and he's on his way here. He claims he had no idea what his ex-wife was planning. Back at the station that evening, Flint put all the evidence on the board. A photo of a smiling Veronica Layton in the center, surrounding it were the details of her carefully planned vacation. She turned off the notifications on her main phone, Flint told her partner, Detective Hayes. Prepared food that the child could get and heat on her own. Wrote instructions, all of which indicates that she was fully aware of what she was doing. All for an affair with a guy who could be her son. Hayes shook his head. What was she counting on? That no one would notice the child's absence for 6 days? That's exactly what she was counting on, Flint said. And maybe she would have succeeded if it hadn't been for the vigilance of her neighbor. Many would have assumed the child was at a relative's or friend's house. Flint's computer screen came to life. A message from the Honolulu Police Department had arrived. They confirmed that Veronica Layton and Xander Pierce had checked into the Royal Hawaiian on Saturday night and were still there. Amazing, Flint said. She doesn't even check her messages. Completely cut herself off from reality. What do we do? Nothing yet. Have the Hawaiian police keep an eye on them. We'll continue to gather evidence. When she comes back, she'll be charged with criminal negligence and child endangerment. In the meantime, Flint glanced at the picture of little Theo. For now, our priority is the boy's well-being. In the silence of her office, Detective Flint stared at the evidence that revealed the story of a mother who had betrayed her most precious possession for the sake of fleeting pleasure. Detective Marlo Flint sat across from Brian Layton in the interview room. Veronica's ex-husband looked exhausted after a rushed flight from Seattle. His once neat haircut was a mess, and deep shadows lingered under his eyes. I just can't believe she did it, he repeated for the 3rd time, wrapping his arms around his head. I mean, I knew Veronica wasn't the perfect mother, but this is out of line. Flint waited patiently for Brian's shock to settle a little. She had learned to distinguish between genuine surprise and feigned innocence. Brian's reaction seemed genuine. Tell me about her, Flint asked. About Veronica as a mother. What was your relationship with her like before and after the divorce? Brian took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. We met at university. Veronica was always ambitious, very driven. When we got married, we had a plan. Career, house, then kids. But Theo came along sooner than planned. An unplanned pregnancy? Yeah, Veronica wanted an abortion at first, but I convinced her to keep the baby, promised I'd help, that everything would be all right. He grinned bitterly. Theo was born, and the first months were hard. Veronica suffered from postpartum depression but refused to seek help. She said she could handle it on her own. She is a nurse, after all. Had she ever left Theo alone before this incident? Brian wrinkled his nose. Not for days, of course, but there were moments. I came home from work one day and found Theo alone in his crib. He was about a year old. Veronica had gone out to the store around the corner, said he was asleep and she thought she'd make it back before he woke up. Flint made a note in her notebook. And how often did these incidents happen? A few times. Then I insisted we hire a babysitter. It helped, but it created a new problem. Veronica was spending less and less time at home. She stayed late at work, enrolled in night classes. She seemed to be avoiding her motherly duties. Was there something else that was bothering you? Brian paused, as if searching for words. Veronica had always been the center of her universe. She could be charming when she wanted to be, especially in public. Everyone thought we were the perfect family. Successful engineer, beautiful nurse, cute kid. But at home, there was a feeling that Veronica saw motherhood as a burden, taking away her personal time and freedom. When did you get divorced? 2 years ago. I got a job offer in Seattle, and I wanted us to move as a family. Veronica said no, said she didn't want to start over, that she had a career and friends here. I offered to live apart temporarily until she found a job in Seattle. Eventually, it turned out she'd been seeing a coworker from the hospital for months. He shook his head. Our marriage was long dead, but I clung to it for Theo's sake. Flint studied Brian closely. You fought for custody? Yes, but the court left primary custody to Veronica. I come down once a month for a weekend, taking Theo for part of the summer vacation. Honestly, I thought about filing for a custody review this year, but I kept putting it off. Why did you want a review? The last few visits, Theo seemed, withdrawn. Said his mom often left him with a neighbor or babysitters. Once mentioned that he spent the whole day alone because the nanny was sick and his mom was at work. He was only 3 at the time. Flint's eyes narrowed. Did you report this to Child Protective Services? Brian lowered his gaze, a look of guilt on his face. No, I talked to Veronica, and she said it was only a few hours, and she kept calling to check on him. Yeah, I believed her. Didn't want to create more conflict. Flint nodded, her face remaining impassive, but inside she was seething. Another parent who knew about the problem but chose not to get involved. What do you know about Veronica's new boyfriend, Xander Pierce? Nothing. Brian raised his eyebrows in surprise. That's the first time I've ever heard that name. How old is he? 19. Brian let out an unhappy chuckle. God, she'd always loved the attention, but this was beyond even her. After her conversation with Brian, Flint met with several of Veronica's co-workers at the hospital. The big picture was becoming clearer and more disturbing. Veronica has always been professional at work, said Doris Chen, a charge nurse. But in the last few weeks she seemed distant, constantly texting someone, smiling into her phone. And last Friday, she asked me to cover for her this week, said she had a family emergency. Had she mentioned Xander Pierce? Doris shook her head, but then frowned. Wait a minute. Last month, a young man was admitted to the department after a motorcycle accident. Nothing serious, just a couple stitches and a concussion. I think his name was Xander. Veronica had volunteered to take care of him, even though it wasn't her patient. Another nurse, Lena Santos, was more forthright. Veronica was always talking about how she missed her freedom, how she felt like her youth was slipping away while she was stuck with a baby. A lot of mothers feel that way sometimes, but most don't take it seriously. And Veronica... Lena paused. She'd gotten drunk at a corporate party once and said she sometimes fantasized about just leaving, to leave everything behind and start a new life on a beach somewhere with some hot guy. And no one took that as a warning sign? Lena shrugged. We thought it was just talk, the drunken dreams of a tired single mom. No one thought she was really capable of abandoning her child. Meanwhile, in Hawaii, Veronica Layton sipped a cocktail by the pool of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. The sun was golden on her skin, and the sea breeze played with her loose hair. Next to her on the lounge chair lay Xander Pierce, a sturdy young man with long hair gathered in a careless bun and a cocky smile that never left his lips. Another one, babe? He asked, pointing to her nearly empty glass. Veronica smiled. Sure. We're on vacation, right? Xander beckoned the waiter over and ordered 2 more cocktails, then reached for Veronica's phone lying on the table. Someone called you again. Maybe I should check it out. Maybe something to do with work? Veronica brushed it off. I'm on vacation. Whatever it is, it can wait until Thursday. They all know I'll be gone. Xander looked at the phone display. There's some Detective Flint here. Called 3 times. A shadow of worry ran across Veronica's face for a moment, but she quickly managed herself. There must be some mistake, or something to do with her ex-husband. He's always causing trouble. How's your baby doing? Xander asked, putting his hands behind his head. Theodore, right? Is he okay with your sister? Of course. Veronica took a sip of her cocktail. Zoe adores him. They have a great time. I'm sure he doesn't even miss me. The lie flew off her lips so easily, she almost believed it herself. Veronica didn't really have a sister named Zoe. She hadn't told anyone that she'd left Theo alone. Not even Xander, who despite his questionable morals, would hardly approve of such an act. You know, Xander said, stroking her hand. I think we should extend our vacation a couple more days. You look so relaxed, so beautiful. Why not enjoy it longer? Veronica's eyes lit up. Are you serious? What about your job? Xander grinned. Freelancing has its advantages. I can work from anywhere. He didn't mention that his freelancing mostly consisted of small scams and temporary part-time jobs. But of course the hotel costs money. Veronica didn't notice the calculating glint in his eyes. Money is not a problem. I have savings. She leaned over and kissed him. You're right. I deserve it. We do deserve it. Later, as Veronica showered, Xander took her purse and photocopied her credit cards. It wasn't in his plans to extend his vacation. On the contrary, he was already thinking about how he could elegantly disappear with Veronica's money, leaving her to pay the huge hotel bill. But for now, he was playing the role of a guy in love, enjoying an exotic vacation with a beautiful woman. Veronica stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a fluffy white robe. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noticing his pensive expression. "About how incredible you are," Xander replied with practiced sincerity in his voice. "Successful, independent, beautiful. How did I get so lucky?" Veronica blossomed at the compliment. In her 33, she often felt invisible to men, especially after Theo was born. The attention of a young, attractive guy was a balm to her bruised ego. She walked over to the mirror and began brushing her hair, trying not to think about her son, left thousands of miles away. Every time Theo's image popped into her mind, she shooed away like a pesky fly. He's okay. He's a big boy. It's only for a few days. She deserves to be happy, deserves to be free. Her phone rang again. This time Veronica glanced at the screen and frowned. Brian. Third call of the day. "Who is it?" Xander asked. "X." Veronica dropped the call. "Probably wants to reschedule a visit or something. It could wait." She tucked the phone away in her purse, deciding not to check it again for the rest of the day. Nothing was going to ruin her perfect vacation. Nothing and no one. In Portland, Detective Flint obtained a warrant to access Veronica Layton's email and bank accounts. Looking through her financial history, Flint noticed a few interesting details. "Look at this," she told Officer Rivera. "In the last month, she withdrew almost $4,000 in cash from 3 different accounts and took out a $2,000 express loan. Preparing for a trip? And more. Look," Flint pointed to a series of transactions. "High-end clothing stores, a spa, a new cell phone, all in the week before she left." "Like she was getting ready for a new life," Rivera observed. "Or trying to impress her young friend," Flint added. "And this is even more interesting. Look at the payments for the last 3 months. The nanny bills have dropped dramatically." "She fired the nanny?" "Looks like it. But she didn't spend any more time with her son." Flint opened another file. "These are timesheets from the hospital. Veronica didn't pick up any extra shifts, so where did the money she was saving for a nanny go?" The answer turned up on Veronica's credit card purchase history. "Fine," Flint said dryly. She replaced the professional babysitter with pizza delivery and a subscription to a children's streaming service. The TV became her free babysitter. Full access to Veronica's email revealed even more disturbing details. In her inbox were several unread emails from Theo's daycare center. "Concerns about Theodore's behavior." Flint read the headline on one of them. It was dated 3 weeks ago. In the letter, the teacher expressed concern about Theo's withdrawn behavior, his fear of being abandoned, and the few times Veronica had forgotten to pick up her son on time. "She didn't even open the letter," Flint said. "Now that's interesting. The reserved tickets in Veronica and Xander's names had been sent to her mail over 2 weeks ago, so this trip had been planned in advance. She really did leave her 4-year-old for 6 days for a romantic vacation with a guy who could be her son." Rivera shook her head. "And she didn't tell anyone?" "That's not just bad mothering," Flint replied. "That's criminal negligence and knowingly endangering the life of a child. You get real time for that." The next day, Flint met with the social worker in charge of Theo's case. "How's he doing?" the detective asked. "Physically fine," replied Grace Williams, a thin woman with kind but tired eyes. "Emotionally, more difficult. He's very quiet, hardly cries at all, which is unusual for a child his age in this situation. I'm afraid it's a sign of emotional neglect. The foster family says he hardly asks about his mother. It's like he's used to her disappearing," Flint muttered. "Exactly. And something else bothers me." Grace opened the case folder. "I checked our records 3 years ago. There was an anonymous call about possible child neglect. A neighbor reported hearing the infant's constant crying from the Layton's apartment and hadn't seen the adults in hours." "What happened?" A social worker conducted a check. Veronica explained that she was in the shower, so she didn't hear the crying. There were no signs of physical abuse. The apartment was clean. The baby was fed. The case was closed. "And there were other complaints?" "Another one. A year and a half ago, a kindergarten teacher noticed that Theo often came in with dirty clothes and didn't look well groomed. Again a check, again no substantial evidence. Grace sighed. The system isn't perfect, Detective. Without clear signs of abuse or neglect, we're limited in our ability to intervene. Flint suppressed a wave of irritation. She knew this song all too well. Overburdened social services, lack of funding, too many cases and too few workers, and children suffer as a result. This time we have all the evidence we need, she said. We need to build up a full picture of systematic child neglect. I want Theo to be safe, and I want his mother to be held accountable. After meeting with the social worker, Flint decided to talk to Imogen Crane again. The elderly neighbor invited the detective to tea. I feel guilty, she admitted, pouring tea into cups. Perhaps I should have noticed sooner. There were signs, little things that I just chalked up to single mother fatigue. What signs? Flint asked. Veronica often left Theo with me unannounced. She'd just knock on the door and say, "Watch him for an hour, will you? I have an important meeting." And those hours sometimes turned into entire evenings. Imogen shook her head. I didn't mind. Theo is such a good boy and I enjoyed his company. But sometimes Veronica forgot to even say thank you. Have you noticed anything unusual in recent weeks? Yeah, now that you ask. Veronica seemed more distant than usual, spending more time on the phone, and she stopped inviting the babysitter who used to come regularly. When I asked why, she said something like, Theo's old enough to have some alone time. Babysitters cost a fortune. Flint made a note. Had she ever mentioned Xander Pierce? Imogen frowned, trying to remember. Not by name. But a few weeks ago, she'd bragged that she'd met a terrific guy who makes her feel young. I'd only seen him once. A very young man had picked her up late at night. Theo was at my place at the time. She didn't come back until just before morning. And how often did she leave Theo with you lately? 3 times in the last 2 weeks. But on Friday, when I expected her to ask to babysit him, she said Theo was spending the weekend with her sister. Veronica doesn't have a sister, Flint said. Imogen turned pale. Oh my God, I should have suspected something. I should have checked. You couldn't have known, Flint said softly. Veronica was deliberately deceiving everyone around her. The important thing is that you sounded the alarm when you suspected something was wrong. Back at the station, Flint had gotten new information from the Honolulu police. They had set up surveillance on Veronica and Xander. The couple spent their days at the beach and pool, their evenings at restaurants and bars. No signs of concern for the baby. She's ignoring all calls and texts, Flint told her supervisor, Captain Dawson. Completely cut herself off from reality. What do you recommend? Dawson asked. Let's stay out of it for now. Let the Hawaiian police continue their surveillance. We'll gather all the evidence and be ready to press charges when she returns. And if she doesn't come back? Flint shrugged. Then we'll put her on the federal wanted list. But I think she'll come back. She's smart enough to realize the longer she's on the run, the worse the punishment will be. Dawson nodded. Good. Keep me informed. And, Flint, he paused. Don't take this case too personally. You know how it is with child cases. Flint nodded, but they both knew it was an empty warning. Child cases always affected her the most. That evening in Hawaii, Veronica and Xander had dinner at an elegant oceanfront restaurant. Veronica was wearing a new black dress she'd bought that afternoon at the hotel boutique with a credit card she'd nearly maxed out. To us, Xander said, raising his glass of wine. To us, Veronica echoed, feeling slightly dizzy from the champagne and the feeling of freedom. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. Not a single mother, not a nurse, not an ex-wife, but just a woman. Desirable, beautiful, carefree. The fact that she'd had to leave Theo alone to do so seemed like a small price to pay for her newfound happiness. She didn't know that Xander had already bought a plane ticket leaving tomorrow night. Didn't know that while she was showering before dinner, he had transferred $2,000 from her credit card to an anonymous account. Didn't know that his entire interest in her was a carefully staged performance aimed at her money and nothing more. All she knew was that a young, handsome man was looking at her with adoration, and the world was finally revolving around her instead of the demands of a 4-year-old. And that was all that mattered. At the same time, Theo sat in the living room of his temporary foster home, clutching a plush dinosaur and a stuffed cat given to Imogene. He didn't cry, he didn't ask about Mommy, he didn't get cranky. He just sat there, quiet and docile, as if trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. When asked by his foster mother if he wanted to call his mom, he shook his head. "Mommy's resting," he said. "I have to be a good boy and stay out of the way." There was no resentment or anger in his voice, just a quiet acceptance of the fact that his needs and wants would always come second. At the Portland police station, Detective Marlo Flint pinned another picture to the board, a shot of Veronica and Xander by the hotel pool, taken by a Hawaiian police agent. Veronica was smiling into her phone camera, taking selfies, and Xander had his arm around her waist, his hand sliding to her purse. "I don't know who's worse," Flint said, looking at the picture. "She abandoned her own child for this crook, and he just seems to be using her." "Poetic justice," remarked Detective Hayes, standing nearby. "For her, maybe," Flint replied, "but not for Theo." Veronica met the morning of her third day in Hawaii alone. She reached for the other side of the bed, but her hand fumbled only for the cool sheets. Opening her eyes, she looked around the room. Xander was nowhere to be found. On the bedside table was a note written in sprawling handwriting. "Went for a run and then yoga. Meet me at the pool at noon, KH." Veronica smiled, so active, so full of energy. She reached for the phone, 10:30 in the morning. Several missed calls and messages that she ignored again. She didn't want reality to intrude on her perfect vacation. She showered, put on a new swimsuit and a light beach dress. Going down to the hotel restaurant, she ordered a late breakfast and a glass of mimosa. Life seemed wonderful. Freedom was as intoxicating as champagne. At noon, she settled down by the pool, but Xander didn't show up. She checked her phone, no messages from him. "I guess yoga took too long," Veronica thought as she ordered another cocktail. At 1 o'clock, she started to worry. At 2, she called him, but his phone was off. At 3, she returned to the room and found that some of Xander's things were gone. His backpack, his laptop, his favorite shirt. But the suitcase remained, giving the illusion that he'd be back. Checking her purse, Veronica went cold. The credit card that had the most money left on it was gone. She frantically logged into the banking app and saw a series of transactions, all from last night while she was asleep. Xander had emptied her account. "That little bastard," she hissed, feeling rage mixed with humiliation. But before she could decide what to do next, there was a knock on the room door. Veronica opened it, expecting to see the maid. Instead, 2 men and a woman stood in front of her, a man and a woman in civilian clothes, but with police badges. "Veronica Layton?" the woman asked. "Detective Kealoha, Honolulu Police Department. And this is Detective Maki. We need to talk to you." Veronica felt the ground slipping from under her feet. "About what? What's this about? Are you the mother of Theodore Layton, age 4, living in Portland, Oregon?" A wave of ice swept over Veronica's body. "Yes," she answered faintly. "Has something happened to him?" "Your son is safe," Detective Maki replied. "But we need you to come down to the station with us. We have questions about why a 4-year-old was left alone in a locked apartment for days." "It's a misunderstanding," Veronica began, but was interrupted by Detective Kealoha's phone ringing. "Yes," the detective answered. "I see." She looked at Veronica. "Additional information from Portland Police. Miss Layton, you're under arrest on charges of criminal negligence and leaving a child in danger. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Veronica seemed numb, as if listening to Miranda's standard warning. This couldn't be happening to her. She's a respected nurse, a regular mom who just decided to take some time off. How could it all come crashing down so quickly? "Is my son okay?" she asked as the detectives led her through the hotel lobby. Patrons turned around, watching what was happening. "Physically, yes," Detective Kealoha replied succinctly. "Thanks to a vigilant neighbor who discovered him on the 4th day of your absence." Shame and panic came over Veronica at the same time. Everyone's going to find out. Colleagues, friends, patients. Everyone would know what she'd done. "Please," she whispered. "It's not what you think. I just wanted some time to myself. Theo knew what to do. I left him food, instructions." Detective Maki looked at her with poorly concealed disgust. You left a 4-year-old alone for 6 days. There's no excuse that can explain that. At the Honolulu police station, Veronica was photographed, fingerprinted, and placed in an interrogation room. Only then did the reality of the situation begin to truly dawn on her. Her vacation was over. Xander had absconded with her money, and now she faced serious criminal charges. Detective Kealoha entered the room with a folder in hand. The investigators in Portland have uncovered some interesting things, Miss Layton, she said, opening the folder. A pre-planned trip, the withdrawal of large sums of cash, firing a nanny a few weeks before you left. All indications are that you deliberately planned to leave your son alone. I was going to ask a neighbor to watch him. Veronica lied quickly. I changed my mind at the last minute. I figured Theo could handle it. He's very independent for his age. He's 4. Kealoha raised an eyebrow. 4-year-olds can't take care of themselves. They can't protect themselves in case of fire, break-ins, accidents. I know I was stupid. Veronica tried to feign remorse, but it was a mistake, an impulsive decision. I deserve a second chance. Impulsive? Kealoha showed the photos. Printed tickets, hotel reservations, dated 2 weeks earlier. Everything was carefully planned. You deliberately put your child in danger for the sake of a romantic vacation with a man you barely knew. Speaking of your beau, the detective added, Xander Pierce left the island last night. According to your bank statements, he withdrew almost $5,000 from your accounts before he left. Veronica covered her face with her hands. That's impossible. He couldn't have... But she knew it was possible. Xander had always seemed too perfect, too considerate. Now she understood why. He was grooming her, gaining her trust so he could steal from her. Miss Layton, Kealoha continued, tomorrow you will be transported to Portland where formal charges will be filed. Until then, you will remain in custody. Can I post bail? Veronica asked, suddenly realizing she could go to jail. That's for the judge in Portland to decide. Given the severity of the charges and the risk of you trying to flee, I wouldn't count on it. That same day in Portland, Detective Marlo Flint received a report of Veronica's arrest. They caught her at the hotel, she informed her partner. Xander Pierce had escaped the day before, emptying her accounts. Poetic justice, Detective Hayes remarked. Not exactly, Flint replied. Real justice would come when she was found guilty and punished by the law. Flint headed to the foster home where Theo had been temporarily placed. She needed to prepare the boy for the fact that his life would soon change again. Theo sat on the living room floor putting together a puzzle. 4 days in a caring foster home had already shown positive changes. He was more sociable, smiling more often. Hi, Theo, Flint said softly, taking a seat next to him. Remember me? I'm Detective Marlo. The boy nodded, keeping his eyes on the puzzle. Theo, your mom's back from Hawaii. She'll be in Portland soon. Theo looked up, his gaze hard to read. Is she taking me home? Flint chose her words carefully. Not right away, Theo. You see, what your mom did, leaving you home alone for days on end, it wasn't right. It was dangerous for you. So now the adults have to decide how best to take care of you. I've been a good boy, Theo said quietly. I did everything my mommy said. Flint's heart clenched. This child wasn't worried about his safety, but about whether he had followed his mother's instructions. You've been a very good boy, Theo, but adults shouldn't leave little children alone for long periods of time. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. When am I going to see Mommy? Soon, Flint answered. But first your daddy's coming from Seattle. He really wants to see you. Theo's face brightened. Dad's coming? Tonight? Tomorrow. In the meantime, you'll stay with the Carson family. Are they taking good care of you? Theo nodded, going back to his puzzle. Mrs. Carson reads to me before bedtime, and Mr. Carson showed me how to make paper airplanes. As they left, Flint discussed the situation with the foster parents. Brian Layton filed an emergency petition for temporary custody, she said. Until Veronica's trial, Theo will likely be with his father, but it's important that he continues to work with a child psychologist. He sometimes wakes up at night, Mrs. Carson said, checking to see if there's someone in the house. It's heartbreaking. He's got a long road ahead of him, Flint nodded. But kids are amazingly resilient when they get the right support. The next day, Veronica Layton arrived in Portland, escorted by federal marshals. She was escorted through the courthouse's service entrance to avoid reporters. The story of a mother who abandoned her child for a vacation with a young lover had become a local news sensation. Veronica looked pale and haggard in her orange prison robe. Her once perfect hair was a tangled mess, and her eyes were red from crying. But Flint, watching her from the corner of the room, noticed something interesting. Veronica was crying not from remorse, but from self-pity. After a formal arraignment and the setting of $100,000 bail, which Veronica could not post, she was transferred to the detention center. Flint was cleared for questioning. "I have nothing to say to you," Veronica said dryly as the detective entered the room. "I already explained everything in Honolulu." "You explained the facts," Flint replied, sitting down across from her. "But I want to understand the motives. Why, Veronica? Why did you decide to leave a 4-year-old child alone for 6 days?" Veronica looked away. "You wouldn't understand." "Try to explain." There was a long pause. Then Veronica sighed. "Do you know what it's like? To be a single mom? To always be tied down, always responsible for someone else? Never having time for yourself?" Her voice got louder. 4 years without a single real vacation. 4 years where my life revolved solely around Theo." "A lot of single mothers get by without abandoning their children," Flint remarked. "I didn't abandon him," Veronica exclaimed. "I left him for 6 days. 6 days! He was safe. He had food. I thought about him." "Did you think about him when you bought one-way tickets to Hawaii? When you turned off your phone notifications? When you lied to everyone that he was with his non-existent sister?" Veronica remained silent, lips pressed together. "I deserved a vacation," she finally said. "I deserved to be happy, if only for a little while." "At the cost of your son's safety." Flint jerked forward. "What if there had been a fire? What if he'd gotten hurt or sick? What if a burglar broke in?" "It didn't happen." "But it could have." Flint could hardly contain her anger. "You're a nurse, Veronica. You see the consequences of accidents every day. You knew the risks, and you went ahead with it anyway." Veronica crossed her arms across her chest, her face frozen. "I'm not going to sit here and listen to you lecture me. I want to see my son." "That's not possible right now." The court granted temporary custody to Theo's father. "Brian?" Veronica shook her head disbelievingly. "He doesn't even live in this town. He sees Theo once a month. And yet he didn't leave the child alone for a romantic vacation," Flint said dryly. "Veronica, do you really not understand the gravity of your situation? You could get up to 5 years in prison." For the first time, there was real fear on Veronica's face. 5 years? For taking a vacation? For criminal negligence and child endangerment. Those are serious charges, Veronica. "But I'm a good mother," Veronica exclaimed, her voice breaking. "I had a weakness, a moment of selfishness, but I love Theo. I can't lose him." Flint stared at the woman in front of her, trying to figure out what was going on in her head. Was Veronica really so detached from reality that she thought her actions were just a moment of selfishness? Or was it a calculated attempt to elicit sympathy? "Veronica," Flint said softly, "help me understand. When you were planning this trip, when you booked the tickets, when you wrote the instructions for Theo, how did you feel? Was there even a moment when you wondered if it was wrong?" Veronica lowered her gaze to her hands. "I thought I could make it up to him when I got back, buy him presents, spend time with him. I thought I deserved this vacation, this happiness with Xander." She grinned bitterly, who, as it turned out, was only interested in my money. "And now? How do you feel now?" "Yeah." Veronica was silent, searching for words. "I know what I did was wrong. But don't I deserve a second chance? Should one mistake define my whole life?" Flint stood up. "It's not one mistake, Veronica. It's a series of conscious decisions made over the course of weeks. And the consequences of those decisions will now define not only your life, but your son's life as well." In the hallway, Flint met Veronica's court-appointed attorney. "She doesn't understand," the detective said. "She really thinks this whole thing is an unfair exaggeration. Narcissistic personality disorder," the lawyer shrugged. "With any luck, a psychiatric evaluation will reduce the sentence, but she won't get temporary custody back, that's for sure." 3 months later, there was a court hearing. Veronica Layton, slimmed down and gaunt from time spent in the detention center, sat next to her lawyer. Journalists, social workers, and Detective Flint were present in the courtroom. Brian Layton sat in the second row. Theo was not present. The child psychologist felt that the boy should not be present at the trial. "The defendant will plead guilty, Your Honor," Veronica's attorney announced after the charges were announced. It was part of a plea bargain. Instead of the maximum sentence of 5 years, Veronica received 2 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 8 months, but followed by 5 years probation and mandatory parenting classes and psychotherapy. The judge, an older woman with an attentive gaze, turned to Veronica. "Miss Layton, I accept your plea bargain, but I want you to understand, you are not a victim of circumstance. You deliberately endangered the most defenseless person in your life, someone who is completely dependent on you." She paused. "In addition to the terms of the deal, I am terminating your parental rights to Theodore Layton, with the option of petitioning for reinstatement no sooner than 3 years after your release, and only if you fully comply with all court orders." Veronica shuddered, her face turning white. "But, Your Honor, full custody is being transferred to the child's father, Brian Layton," the judge continued, ignoring the objection. "You will be allowed supervised visits after the sentence is served, if the child and his psychologist deem it appropriate." As Veronica was being led out of the courtroom, she cast one last glance at Flint. In her eyes, the detective saw not remorse but anger, the anger of someone who still considered herself a victim of injustice. After the hearing, Flint approached Brian Layton. "How's Theo?" she asked. "Better," Brian replied. "He moved in with me in Seattle. He's in a new kindergarten, and he sees a psychologist 3 times a week. Still has nightmares, but less frequent." "Does he ask about his mom?" "Sometimes. We say Mom made a mistake, and now she needs time to fix herself." Brian rubs his eyes. "You know what the hardest part is? His birthday was 2 weeks ago, 5 years. He asked if Mom was coming. I didn't know what to answer." Flint nodded. She'd seen many cases of child abuse in her career, but Theo's story had touched her particularly deeply. Perhaps because Veronica wasn't a monster in the traditional sense, she was an ordinary woman who'd let selfishness overshadow her maternal instinct. "He has a good father," Flint said. "That's the main thing." "I'm trying," Brian replied modestly. "You know, on the day of the trial, Theo said something that struck me. He said, 'Dad, I'm glad I live with you now. You always come back.'" Brian shook his head, as if the most important thing to him was just knowing he wouldn't be abandoned again. "Children are amazing," Flint said. "They are able to forgive and heal if they feel loved and protected." The next day, Flint closed Layton's case file. Veronica was sent to the state women's prison to serve her sentence. Xander Pierce remained a wanted man, but that was a different department's case. The story had come to an end. Justice had been served as far as it could be. But for Theo, it was only the beginning of a long journey, a journey in which he had to relearn to trust, to feel safe, to believe that he was worthy of love. One day, months later, Flint received a letter from Brian Layton. Inside was a child's card with a dinosaur on it and jagged block letters, "Thank you that you have found me, Theo," and a picture of a smiling boy in a park, holding his father's hand tightly. Flint pinned the card on the wall of her office, a reminder of why she does this job, a reminder that even in the darkest stories, there can be a light of hope. In prison, Veronica Layton sat in her cell, looking at the small photograph of Theo she was allowed to keep. The events of the past few months seemed like a surreal nightmare to her. Sometimes she still couldn't believe that her life had been ruined because of only 6 days of absence. Other times, she was overwhelmed by the gravity of her act, especially when she thought about how scared Theo must have been when he woke up alone in an empty apartment. The psychologist had said that the denial phase would be replaced by real remorse. That in time, she'd realize, that it was a long road. But right now, Veronica just looked at her son's picture and thought about how things might have turned out differently if she had just asked for help instead of deciding she deserved a vacation at any cost. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Theo and his father were building a sand castle on the beach. The boy laughed as the waves came close to their creation. Before, he would have cried as he saw what he had built crumble. But now he just started building a new, stronger castle, away from the water. "Look, Daddy," he said, pointing to his work. "This one won't break. It's beautiful," Brian replied, hugging his son. "And even if it does break, we can always build a new one. Together." Theo nodded, his eyes shining with a new, careful trust. A trust that was slowly, day by day, coming back into his life.